Hi there, welcome back. Just a fortnight ago, India's leader of opposition Rahul Gandhi had ignited a debate on whether India has permanently missed the manufacturing bus to China. This week marked 10 years of the Make in India policy of the Modi government. There was not much fanfare, just a small release and a blog by the Prime Minister. Uncharacteristic of this government, but maybe they are too bogged down with other stuff. Plus, of course, the elections in Haryana and Jammu and Kashmir are occupying the political mindspace. Make in India, nevertheless, is an area of huge national importance. I'm going to focus on that. Also, a provocative thought. Should Quad turn into a military alliance, a NATO of the East? Are we not moving in that direction already? That's going to be our second story this week. Let's get started. It was the first Independence Day speech from the ramparts of the Red Fort in 2014 for Narendra Modi as Prime Minister of India, when he announced with flourish the Make in India campaign, which later evolved into both a philosophy and a policy. The idea was simple. Since India had missed manufacturing bus, first to China in the 1980s and then to the Southeast Asian tiger economies in 1990s, it was time to course correct in mission mode.
मैं आज लाल किले की प्राचीर से विश्व भर में लोगों से कहना चाहता हूं, कम मेक इन इंडिया, आइए हिंदुस्तान में निर्माण कीजिए.
This week marked 10 years of that campaign, not just for the Modi government, but for India as a nation and society. The government kept the anniversary low-key. Prime Minister himself wrote a blog highlighting some of the achievements. India's defense exports have increased 21 times from about rupees 1,000 crores to rupees 21,000 crores now. The biggest success has been achieved in the mobile handsets manufacturing ecosystem. Almost 100% of mobiles used in India are India-made now. A decade ago, the number was about 10%. Also, while India had just 2 mobile manufacturing units in 2014 when Modi took over, the number stands at a staggering 200, with mobile exports valued at over US $15 billion this year. That's a huge jump. Obviously, all this would not have happened without a focused, decisive push from all arms of the government. A glimpse of the whole of government approach was given by India's G20 Sherpa and former CEO Niti Aayog, Amitabh Kant, to your network. Listen to him.
We're in a country where we used to import all smartphones. Today, look at this in a short while. We are now making smartphones. We are the third largest exporter in a very short while. We are touching a value of 15 billion.
This was backed by a personal push from the Prime Minister. I recall in one of his Man Ki Baat addresses, him pushing the indigenous toy industry, asking people to not buy Chinese toys. Exports of toys, which stood at $100 million, are now over 350 million plus, 3 times more than 2014. Those are encouraging numbers.
मैं अपने स्टार्टअप मित्रों को, हमारे नए उद्यमियों से कहता हूं, टीम अप फॉर टॉयज. आइए मिलकर खिलौने बनाएं. अब सभी के लिए लोकल खिलौनों के लिए वोकल होने का समय है.
But have we succeeded in boarding the missed manufacturing bus? I'm afraid not. That's a lot of reform for tinkering results. Against an ambition of 25% by 2025, manufacturing's share as a percentage of India's GDP hovers in the 15-17 bracket still. For China, that figure is 26%. More importantly, China accounts for 30% of global manufacturing. The number stands at a paltry 3% for India. The gap seems daunting. Only a couple of months ago, India's respected industry veteran N.R. Narayana Murthy of Infosys said as much, highlighting that China is far ahead in the race to be a global manufacturing hub. Let's listen to him.
Chinese are disciplined. They have national pride. They work hard. They don't argue like we do. All of that. So that country has a GDP of 6 times that of India. We were about the same in the middle 70s. So therefore, I think it is too audacious to say we will become manufacturing hub and all of that.
Murthy called it an audacious dream. In a way, nobody can accuse Narendra Modi of not having audacity in his dreams. But despite the Prime Minister's personal push and involvement, Make in India has only managed to give mixed results. Let me give you the right picture of where we stand today and how we go into the future. All major nations that today stand in the developed or advanced or well-off per capita income category, from the United States to the United Kingdom, from Germany to Russia, from China to the tiger economies of Southeast Asia like Vietnam and Malaysia, first transitioned from agrarian societies to industrial ones on the back of manufacturing boom. The first, second and third industrial revolutions roughly correspond to Europe, America and East Asia, making that transition respectively. India missed the first and second industrial revolutions because both happened when we were a colonial economy under the British exploitative arrangements. Just one example. The British got railways in England in 1825 and quickly gave it to India in 1837 in the then Madras. But that was for transportation of goods and minerals needed to push industrialization imperatives of Britain, not for India. First passenger train had to wait till 1853. But that's not enough. While the British gave themselves an underground suburban metro train system in 1863 itself, India had to wait till 1984. Yes, good 119 years before then Calcutta, or now Kolkata, got the underground metro services. You see the difference? The goods train was needed to push the colonial exploitative economy. The metro, on the other hand, was for people and hence not a priority. In fact, whatever industries the British left in 1947 in India were essentially a product of industrialization that was needed to assist the war effort during the First and Second World Wars. We missed the third wave of industrialization completely owing to our own follies. We could have done in the 1970s and the 1980s what China did at that time. But then that's where Rahul Gandhi's ancestors come in. Between Nehru and Indira Gandhi, the socialist model, which was neither here nor there, the license permit quota Raj, the controlled povertarian economy, meant that we entered the new millennium as clear laggards. In the same period, China not only aligned its industrial policy, but even its foreign policy to reap maximum benefits. Contrast Deng Xiaoping's famous quote, "I don't care for the color of the cat so long as it catches mice," with the dogmatic hubris of New Delhi elite of that era. And you know why we miss the bus that Rahul Gandhi rues about. Such was the apparent stupidity of those times that in the name of promoting the handlooms sector, for example, controls were put on imports of textiles machinery. Result, Bangladesh raced past us in textiles in the same 2 decades after the 1980s. Two ironies there. One, during much of India's post-independence history, economic planning and financial management of the nation's economy was in the hands of leftist Marxist economists of the Delhi school. Yet, when they failed miserably, they coined the term Hindu rate of growth. Imagine godless communists scapegoating Hindu religion after failing at the wheel. Second, from model of public sector occupying commanding heights of the economy under Nehru to the nationalization of banks and even car making under Indira Gandhi, India missed that agrarian to manufacturing transition only for Rahul Gandhi to now say, oh, China has beaten us. But as wise men say, why cry over spilt milk? Let's focus on the present. Since the mobile phones and hence the electronics equipment sector has become the most visible success story of Make in India, the reality is that it remains low-end manufacturing focused on assembly of components. Some of the drawbacks are being addressed by bringing in components-specific clauses in the PLI scheme by the government. The Modi government has backed its intent with policy, which gets reflected in ease of doing business rankings. From 142 in 2014 to 63 now is a quantum leap. In 2022, the production-linked incentives scheme was launched to bridge the cost gap that industries faced between established manufacturing hubs like Vietnam or China and India. Listen into Kant again.
The patent registration, that is innovation in India, was taking a lot of time. It used to take 7 years, 8 years. We came out with a national intellectual property right policy in 2016. We overhauled the IPR regime. The technical manpower in the patent office was increased 4 times. The average time taken for examination of a patent application was reduced from an average of 72 months to just 5 to 10 months. That has been the reduction from 72 months to just 5 to 10 months. And the patent office has granted over 100,000 patents in financial year 24.
There is a lot more that can be done. I would highlight a couple of my own observations for which I have spoken to at least half a dozen industry representatives. 1, and perhaps the most important, there is an impedance between the Prime Minister's vision and his bureaucracy implementing it. I'm not saying resistance, which obstructs, but a typical bureaucratic response which adds layers of caution, thus slowing down results. Case in point, slow takeoff for the electric vehicles ecosystem. Industry bodies frequently complain of red tape despite clear vision at the top. 2, there is still recurrent policy confusion. Case in point, the lingering renegotiation of free trade agreements. FTAs were meant to free up trade, but Make in India requires spokes to be put to disincentivize imports. This has led to the entry of non-tariff barriers, adding to the confusion. The FTA talks need quicker resolution. Another policy quagmire is the GST law. Despite dividends on the tax side of the biggest Modi government reform, not just for the center but even for the states, in its present form, it leaves a lot of discretion and hence scope for bureaucratic meddling at the lower levels of industry-government interface. 4th, Prime Minister's team perhaps needs to have a hard look at the Skill India mission and whether the Skills Ministry is in right alignment with the objectives and targets. China origin COVID was a once-in-a-century pandemic that left millions of lives and families in shambles. But the geopolitical and geoeconomic shifts it engendered place India in an advantageous situation. Having seen the kind of irresponsibility with which the communist state of China conducted itself, the world is realigning its global supply chains. India is emerging as an alternative supply source given its raw materials, low labor costs, and growing manufacturing base. Above all this, India with its conduct during COVID showed to the world that we are a friend nation, a Vishwamitra. We align ourselves with the greater common good and not narrow economic agendas. China had 4 decades of a free run with the West, indulging with the communist regime. From the time of Nixon, when the DC establishment thought they had made their smartest move by taking away China from Russia, to Clinton championing China's entry into the World Trade Organization, to Obama's Pacific Free Trade, to a 180-degree turn with Trump blaming China for USA's deindustrialization. The wheel, in a way, has come full circle. Just a fortnight back, the United States Congress passed 25 legislations that put spokes in China's capacity to trade globally, particularly with America. Europe is building a great tariff wall against Chinese imports. The European Union imposed 50% import duties on Chinese electric cars recently. India has to take full advantage of this changed geopolitical reality. A window has emerged, howsoever narrow, perhaps a decade, in which we must forget hubris and remember what Deng said. Do not bother about the color of the car so long as it catches mice. As per World Bank data, when you take world as a whole, the share of manufacturing as a percentage of global GDP has been consistently declining, from a peak of about 20% at the turn of the century to about 15% now. This seems in line with the general economic trend, according to which, with progress comes a shift in economic activity from agriculture to manufacturing to services. We are already in Industrial Revolution 4.0, and let's not miss the ship. Moving on. Remember, friends, in the second episode of this show, we had picked a trend. I had wondered aloud whether Quad was getting more aggressive on China. That was in the backdrop of the meeting of foreign ministers of the grouping, India, United States, Japan, and Australia, in Tokyo in the month of July. This week, Quad leaders met in Wilmington, Delaware of the United States. Prime Ministers Fumio Kishida, Anthony Albanese, and Narendra Modi joined President Joe Biden in his high school for their annual musings. The result was the Wilmington Declaration that clearly takes the Tokyo joint statement 2 notches higher when it comes to Quad's position on China. Quad is not a military grouping. It calls itself a regional alliance between 4 maritime democracies of the Indo-Pacific aimed at harnessing synergies for greater common good of the region. Leaders do not tire out to emphasize that it is not against China or aimed at China in any manner, a reason why the American press has lost all interest in Quad. The New York Times, for example, sent its junior health correspondent to cover the event in Wilmington because of the launch of the Moonshot Cancer Initiative, and not their foreign affairs editor. But obviously, China is the elephant in the room. The alliance seeks to counterbalance China's expansionism in its neighborhood, coercion with military means, threat of use of force, misuse of international law to its advantage on trade and technology, and abuse of rule of law to change the global order. Given this, are we moving in the direction of militarization of Quad, howsoever subtly so? Let me read the tea leaves for you. For the first time, a visible military component has been added. In 2025, the Coast Guards of the 4 countries would carry out a Quad at-sea observer mission to improve interoperability and advance maritime safety across the Indo-Pacific. In all likelihood, this is not going to be a one-off mission and might get institutionalized as an annual operation. Navies of the 4 nations are already part of the Malabar exercises, but those happen outside of the Quad mechanism. The declaration also launched a pilot project to pursue shared airlift capacity and leverage collective logistics strengths. On the face of it, this is aimed at coordinating civilian response to natural disasters more rapidly and efficiently across the Indo-Pacific region. But if you discount the diplomats, this is dual-use arrangement that can be easily turned military. In the backdrop of an ongoing semiconductors war with China, so that China does not control this crucial building block of Industrial Revolution 4.0, the Wilmington Declaration brings together the Quad partners to realize a diversified and competitive market and to enhance resilience in semiconductor supply chains. Most significantly, while reiterating that the UN Security Council needs reform, the statement adds the word urgent before need for the first time, thus indicating towards a policy shift that broad-bases decision-making at the world body. Amid a general media boredom with Quad, the leaders sought to reassure that Quad was here to stay. The statement underscored how over the last 4 years, the leaders had met 6 times and foreign ministers 8 times and built a vital and enduring regional grouping that will buttress the Indo-Pacific for decades to come. Prime Minister Modi said as much.
हमारा मैसेज साफ है, क्वाड is here to stay, to assist, to partner and to complement.
We express serious concern over recent dangerous and aggressive actions in the maritime domain. We seek a region where no country dominates and no country is dominated. One where all countries are free from coercion and can exercise their agency to determine their futures, says this statement. Guess who it is aimed at? This month marked the first time that a Chinese military aircraft crossed into Japanese airspace. On August 27, the Japanese Defense Ministry said in a statement that a Chinese Y-9 surveillance aircraft violated the territorial airspace of Japan off the Danjo Islands in Nagasaki Prefecture in the East China Sea. It prompted Japan to deploy fighter jets on an emergency basis. The incursion lasted little over 2 minutes and hence can't be termed a mistake. It was planned to provoke because the Chinese aircrafts circled waters southeast of the islands for over 2 hours before and after the airspace violation, before returning to their territory. 8 days before that, on August 19, a new flashpoint emerged between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea, when Beijing and Manila's vessels collided near the Sabina Shoal, both accusing the other of ramming them on purpose. The shoal, claimed by China as Xianbin Jiao and as Escoda Shoal by Philippines, is located some 75 nautical miles from the Philippines' west coast and 630 nautical miles from China. Escalating it further, the Chinese carried out a blockade with a 40-ship armada, preventing the Filipino Navy from restocking their already docked vessel at the shoal. This was, of course, not the first time. There has been a string of dangerous encounters in recent months as the two sides seek to enforce their claims on disputed reefs and outcrops, including the Second Thomas Shoal and the Scarborough Shoal. In the July episode, we showed you how China blasted powerful water cannons at the Philippines ships, and in one case, even physically attacked their personnel using improvised weapons like they did with India in Ladakh during the 2020 Galwan standoff. Taking these developments into account, the Quad Declaration mentions, and I quote, "We are seriously concerned about the situation in the East and South China Seas. We continue to express our serious concern about the militarization of disputed features and coercive and intimidating maneuvers in the South China Sea. We condemn the dangerous use of Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels, including increasing use of dangerous maneuvers. We also oppose efforts to disrupt other countries' offshore resource exploitation activities. We reaffirm that maritime disputes must be resolved peacefully and in accordance with international law, as reflected in UN clause." Unquote. How long before the patience runs out and Quad takes a military turn? Remember, in the case of Philippines, there is already a military pact with the United States, much like the Article 5 of NATO, making it incumbent upon the US to come to the aid of the island nation in case of war. It is anybody's guess how the situation would unravel if one of those skirmishes between navies or coast guards of Philippines with China turned deadly. Would Philippines activate the defense pact? And if that happens, wouldn't the interoperability clauses of Quad kick in? Also remember that except for Prime Minister Narendra Modi, rest of the 3 leaders are lame duck in their respective countries as of now. President Biden has already passed on the baton to Kamala Harris for the November election. Prime Minister Kishida has bowed out as we speak, and Prime Minister Albanese would seek re-election in first quarter of next year. So by the time the next Quad Leaders Summit happens in the summer of 2025 in New Delhi, it might be a full-bodied and robust set of leaders willing to step on the paddle when it comes to dealing with the bully in the Indo-Pacific backyard. Reading the tea leaves between joint statements each year, I can tell you, China might get named. And why not? Thanks for watching.